At 6:47 p.m. on Sunday night, bullets started flying at Bondi Beach, and well before any of us really knew what was going on, we were getting reports and calls about a big police event down at the beach. Yoni, you and I both work at The Australian, and across the country and in Sydney, all of our staff suddenly clocked on, even the ones who weren't working. I started filing stories, you raced down to Bondi Beach. But it wasn't long on Sunday before opinions started to flow. Once it was clear that this was a shooting, that it had targeted Jewish people at a Hanukkah event, and that many people were dead and seriously injured, social media started lighting up with the old cliche, thoughts and prayers, people saying that they were shocked. And some of those people were also posting, amazing eyewitness vision of what they'd seen. That's been incredibly useful for us. What was your reaction as you started to see those opinions coming in, not just facts?
I think in the vacuum of fact, opinion arrives, and we've seen that in so many other scenarios. We saw it during the Bondi Junction stabbing event. That was a mass casualty event, and everyone had an opinion on the motivation for that before we eventually found out who was behind it and what their motivation was. And we saw the same thing with the Lindt Cafe siege in 2014. And there are still divided opinions over what was truly motivating that in the end. With this particular event, I kind of took a moment when I was down at the beach to sort of catch up on the facts, because as you would know, there are so many sources of information rushing in at the same time. And when you're standing at a police cordon waiting for an event to happen, such as a stretcher coming out or an eyewitness to turn up, you can get lost in what's happening around you, and you can forget that there are other sources of information coming in from the hospitals, from the police headquarters, from the politicians. And so I just took a beat to kind of step back, go through my phone, have a look at Twitter, have a look at Instagram, see some of the footage that was coming in. And that's when I saw some of the opinions cropping up on my screen. And what surprised and slightly galled me was that the people who were expressing these opinions, the thoughts and prayers, the shock, not so much remorse, but certainly they're surprised that an event like this would happen at Bondi Beach, were the very people who, in my mind and in the mind of a lot of Jewish people around Australia, have been watching for the past 2 years, animating this discussion and animating it to an extent where we have felt unsafe, where it's been largely unsafe for us to express our Jewish identity in a really wholesome way, and in a way that in Australia we've always been able to do. It's never been a problem to say to someone in this country that you're Jewish. Well, I mean, it now is. It's been a problem for the past 2 years, and it's something that I know a lot of Jews are self-conscious about. You can imagine it. You're having a conversation with someone you've never met before, and they might ask you where you're from. And if you say that you're from Israel, as I am, at best they might be uncomfortable with that, because morally responsible opinion are supposed to have morally responsible people are supposed to have an opinion on wars that are taking shape around the world. We're supposed to have an opinion on Russia and Ukraine. We're supposed to have an opinion on Israel and Hamas. And so when you express that to someone, they don't really know what to say. And on the other end of that spectrum are people who have very strong opinions about that and might judge you accordingly. So it's been tough.
Yeah. It's been interesting watching you go through that. We're really good friends, and I often get extremely annoyed and angry on your behalf about slights that you're receiving or telling me about or that I observe. And you are, I think, dealing with those with a lot more on a lot more of an even keel than I am. I'm enraged, and you are kind of dealing with it quite calmly. But do you actually feel calm, and has your opinion changed since Sunday?
I don't think my opinion has changed about the threat environment in this country. I think my feeling about the threat environment was always very much aligned with what our Jewish leaders had been warning and what the Israeli government had been saying for quite a long time, which is that Australia, a city in Australia, will almost certainly come under some form of attack motivated by hatred towards Jews at some point in the future. And some of our Jewish leaders have been saying, I remember distinctly after Alex Rivchin's home was attacked, he was one of the first people to say, it's not a matter of if, but when. And I don't think anyone quite expected that what would happen at Bondi Beach, A, would occur, and B, that it would be of such a significant scale with such an intelligence failing underpinning it. I think what we expected was stronger leadership on the issue of antisemitism, and what, again, remains so striking and galling about this situation. I've just come back from a press conference with the Prime Minister, and I asked him, why haven't you announced a suite of anti-Semitism measures that can be instituted or rolled out at a point in the future? Why are we having a conversation about gun laws right now? It seems rather like a distraction. And he wasn't really able to give a very satisfactory answer on that. And I can tell you from my conversations with people overseas, people in Israel and elsewhere, they have woken up this morning and texted me saying, are we really having a conversation about gun law reform? 24 hours after what happened at Bondi Beach. So I think that's really striking. And I do wonder as well if the information that we obtained from the press conference today about the presence of an ISIS flag might provide the Prime Minister with an escape hatch down a separate path away from hardcore anti-Semitism into just pure jihadism. That would be a shame too, because this isn't just a matter of jihadism. He shouldn't be attempting to separate what occurred, or he shouldn't try to delineate between this being an ISIS-motivated attack or this being a Hamas-motivated attack or an Iranian-motivated attack. I mean, it was an attack that specifically targeted Jewish people, and that's not within dispute.
Yeah, the idea of anti-Semitism being racism or being a deliberate targeting of Jews and any attack on Jews being an act of anti-Semitism, all those ideas are actually not that clear in the minds of some people, apparently. But they're clear to me. I mean, like the Hamas attack on October 7. You know, well, was that resistance or were these oppressed people sort of breaking out? No, it was an anti-Semitic terrorist attack, clearly, because the victims were Jews, overwhelmingly. There were, of course, some non-Jews who were caught up in the chaos, including some Muslims, security guards and people like that. Behind those heartbroken emojis and prayer hands, I think what you've identified in a piece for The Australian is the hypocrisy of those people you were speaking about before. We're talking about people like Abby Chatfield, Mary Kostakidis, Randa Abdel Fattah, people who have spoken loud and clear about their dislike of Israel, their belief that Zionism is evil and that Zionism is somehow a genocidal project, as opposed to just being what it actually is, which is the belief that Jewish people deserve a homeland. So why do you think, given their views are pretty clear, I would say they're verging towards, if not actually, anti-Semitic, why bother with the prayer hands and the broken hearts and the shock and horror?
It's a great question. And that was, again, so surprising and striking about it. It's why when I saw it, I thought to myself, you hypocrites. You are the people who've been building this for the past 2 years. And I want to give these people the benefit of the doubt. I want to imagine in my heart of hearts that this is not the outcome they wanted. And I don't think you would believe that either. I don't think most right-thinking people would assume that this was an outcome that any one of these people wanted. These people are activists, and they have a specific goal in their mind, and they have a certain type of language and rhetoric that they're using. I guess the issue is that Jewish leaders and Australians in general, you don't need to be an ally of the Jewish community to say this. I mean, they've been saying to these people, your language is hate-filled. You are using specific terms like globalize the Intifada, and you are deliberately trying to cancel a certain group of people from polite society, those people being Zionists. I mean, this use of the word Zionism as a cover for Jews has been one of the most insidious phrases to enter the modern lexicon. I mean, the word Zionism has been around for decades, but its usage now in common parlance has been such that I'm deeply cynical about the way that most of these people use it. To me, when I hear Zionist, I just hear Jew.
Yeah, as you've written, it's a fancy word for Jew. But I'm a Zionist. I believe that Israel has the right to a homeland. I mean, just like I think that you are a feminist, although you're not a woman, because you believe that women should be equal. That is...
That would be their cover, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Well, when I refer to Zionists, I'm not specifically referring to Jews. I'm referring to anyone who happens to have a belief system aligned with Zionism or who believes in Zionism. I think that's rubbish. I think they know what they're doing when they use the term Zionism. They're talking about us.
I think there's something more cynical at the base of the blooming in content about Zionism or Zios. It's, I think, a group of people who identified a vacuum in the culture or an opportunity in the culture to get a lot of likes and go viral. They were talking about Black Lives Matter. Then they were talking about trans rights. Then they started talking about October 7. Some people in the kind of online commentary space, I think on social media, and Randa Abdel Fattah would be one, have been talking about Palestine for years. You know, this is clearly an issue that she deeply believes in, even though I disagree. Abby Chatfield, on the other hand, was not a scholar of the Middle East before October 7, 2023. Clementine Ford, I would say, fits into the same basket. So isn't there a very cynical exploitation of this crisis in the Middle East, where a really rational opinion to have would be, well, this is horrible. I hate the fact that everybody's dying, and it's way too complex for me to have an opinion on, really.
Or to just say what happened on October 7 was horrible, and I could never possibly support the actions of Hamas, a prescribed terrorist group. And when, I hear about the rapes that occurred at the Nova Festival, or when I heard about the indiscriminate killings or the families that were burned in their homes, yes, that is absolutely horrible. And then it would be just as justifiable position to say, I also don't like war, and I don't like what Israel's done in Gaza, and I don't like seeing a really high civilian death count. That's something that no one wants to see. Israelis don't want to see it either. The part that's so perverse and deranged to me is that throughout this conflict, you and I would have encountered people, either at rallies or doing our jobs or people we met at the pub or wherever, who seem to just have a very galvanized view on this conflict. It's polarized, that would probably be the better word, in which if you have a view about Israel's war in Gaza, you cannot possibly have a view about Hamas. I've found it really hard to find a person who can say to me, I really don't like Hamas, horrible people, wish they weren't involved in anything to do with the administration of Gaza, wish they would just go away. I also don't like what the Israeli government is doing in Gaza either. I just wish this war would end. I'm finding a very limited number of people who occupy that middle space. Everything's so polarized. People don't talk about what doesn't rate. And we're in the same business. We're in the entertainment business. We want to speak to our readers about what they want to hear, and we want to also tell them what we think they should hear.
I think the tone of that conversation too has really created a fear about news content or about coverage of this war among people who shouldn't be afraid of the news. Because I'm a parent, exposed to a lot of communications, directed at parents. Here's how, 5 ways that you can talk to your kids about what happened at Bondi Beach. How about turning off news media for a couple of days? Keep your kids close and change the subject is the tone of communications I'm seeing and getting. And I think a lot of that is very well-meaning. And yeah, kids are scared. It is really scary. But I don't think that after, the attack on Pearl Harbor in the 1940s, that parents in America or Australia turned their televisions off and told the kids not to watch. I don't think after JFK's assassination in the 60s or the Vietnam War that parents were telling their kids they didn't need to worry about this, go and read a book. These kids are going to inherit the world that we've created for them. They need to know about what's going on, in my view. Do you remember learning about the news or engaging with the news as a kid and what that was like for you?
Well, I remember that, particularly in this country, I think we've been extremely lucky. We're not exposed to weekly terrorist attacks of the kind that I know are occurring in other parts of the world, and particularly where I'm originally from, in Israel. And I know that in Israel, similar efforts to shelter and mollycoddle children after a terrorist attack don't really exist. I mean, there's very much a focus on resilience and just getting out and living your life and thumbing your nose at terrorists by getting on with life. I just think that is something that we're not used to in this country. I'm not sure if that should be, I despise the term the new normal. I don't think we're entering a new normal. I think this is an anomalous, horrific event that occurred on Sunday. It'll be up to parents as to what they want to expose their children to. I don't know. I mean, what do you think?
But there's a way to talk to kids about these kinds of things that, where you focus on the heroes and the helpers. You talk about Mr. Ahmed, the tobacconist who tackled one of the shooters to the ground. You talk about the Bondi detective who hid behind a tree and shot Sajid Akram dead. You talk about the off-duty cops who rushed to Bondi, the uniformed officers, the ambulance, the off-duty doctors who found themselves, compressing wounds and doing CPR. In any dramatic event, you can always find a ray of light to help kids get through it. But they have a right to know what's going on, I think.
Of course they do. But I think you're right too, that we should be maximising the stories of courage, bravery, loyalty, service, duty. I mean, those are things that are missing from all the Hollywood movies now. All the Hollywood movies we see now are about depressing things, about betrayal and anger and murder. And we should be talking about more positive things. And we should be talking about the positives arising out of this. And the stories that are arising out of what occurred on Sunday are just utterly extraordinary, and they continue to develop. I mean, in a similar fashion, we talk about how to solve this issue moving forward in terms of educating people about anti-Semitism. One of the things that surprises me, particularly about the left side of politics, the progressive left, is that they have been so willing to embrace certain minority groups. I don't need to name any particular one, but academic institutions, childcare centres, corporations have gone out of their way to accommodate certain minorities in the spirit of social justice and in the spirit of inclusion. Why is it so hard to do that for a minority population like the Jews, which is subject to actual violence, not just microaggressions, I don't understand why the progressive left has been so willing and capable to do that for some groups, but not for others. In fact, the progressive left seems to be decidedly against doing that for the Jews.
Yeah, I mean, how on earth did antisemitism, which is a form of racism, become a so-called progressive value? You know, it's ridiculous. I think the answer can only be that there's, in our society, sadly, a latent fear and hatred of Jews. And if you scratch the surface, it comes bubbling up.
I'm also somewhat convinced that there is a certain derangement that exists amongst these people in which they think that talking about Zionism and Zios and genocide and ethnic cleansing has no consequence, and that they are entirely valid and justified in expressing themselves in that way. I think what I'd like to see from our Prime Minister and from our leaders is someone to just say, you have to stop doing that. And this isn't a freedom of speech issue. This is an issue of hate and incitement. This is not protest anymore. There is a difference, and this is what I wrote about in the piece. There is a difference between protest and criticism of government handling of a war and incitement to violence. And for the people who still need to be convinced that their words have consequences, I mean, you just need to look at Bondi Beach. It's happening. This is real. And you don't just need to look at Bondi Beach. I mean, the Jewish community saw this coming. We saw it happening in Washington. 2 people were murdered there. And we saw it happen in Manchester. It was only a matter of time before it came here. What we didn't know was that it was going to be an order of magnitude bigger over here. Several, perhaps.
Yoni Bashan, thank you very much.
Thank you.